Hey, what's up everybody? This is Super501 and today I want to show you guys an incredibly strong Amara build for Mayhem 10, and this is a pretty similar build that has been out for a long time, pretty much since your spiritual driver came out, and it is still pretty much just a classic spiritual driver build. And the reason I want to update this is because if the new takedown is anything similar to the old one where they like to just have extremely large amounts of enemies in pretty much every area and every boss fight, it'll still be incredibly strong, possibly one of the strongest builds you can do with it. And even without that, this build is still very strong at killing bosses, at doing lesser mobbing areas such as slaughter shafts, stuff like that. And with all that being said, we can go into our talents. Now, with Spiritual Driver, we have to go into the Brawl tree first. We're going Root to Rise, 2 into that for max health, 3 into Personal Space for increased damage, 5 into Arm Steel, which gives us that increased splash damage. Now, if you're not using splash damage weapons, you can just go into more Root to Rise, into Helping Hands. Anything tanky here is going to be fine. If you're using any splash damage weapons, you might as well go into this for extra damage. Then Mindfulness, the main thing we need from this tree, which gives us that stacking movement speed buff to give us a massive damage increase from Spiritual Driver. Then we're going to Fist of the Elements, 5 into Anima, which gives you increased status effect damage, duration, all super good. Steady Hands, mainly to get lower in the tree, which gives you handling and accuracy, which does help with, say, recursions and stuff that have some decent recoil. And if you're using the Mayhem effect that gives you increased damage, but gives you massively increased recoil, this can help with that a little bit. Tempest, increased elemental damage, 5 into Wildfire. This is pretty good because since you're Amara, you have increased status effect damage and duration. We're using a lot of weapons that have really high damage over time. Spreading that around can do some really good damage while mobbing. Deep Bow, increased magazine size with your elemental weapons. 3 into Indiscriminate. This is probably one of the strongest talents in the game. This just has a chance to ricochet extra rounds. And say if you're using like a recursion, which we are when mobbing. Like I've said, this is still, since pretty much the first couple of videos I made on Borderlands 3 when the game first came out, I've said this is one of the best mobbing weapons in the game, and that has held true up until right now. And it's still incredibly strong, still going to be incredibly strong probably for the raid as well. This just helps with that. Your rounds are already bouncing around, has a chance to create more rounds that then bounce around. Super strong. Then we have Sustainment. Our main survivability talent gives you lifesteal with your elemental weapons. Pretty much with this being 20% at Mayhem 10, with how much damage you deal, pretty much any shot's going to full heal you. So it's just about not getting one shot in between your shots. Forceful Suppression, you deal bonus elemental damage based on your action skill element, which is just some extra damage, so pretty good on there. Mythical Assault, 2 into Do Harm. These are mainly Do Harm and Violent Tapestry. They give some buffs. They're mainly stack these up, get some buffs, but it's not super important, and to get lower in the tree as well. 3 into Steady Hands. Mainly we're doing this reload speed, but we do mode switch sometimes, depending on what weapons we're using and if we want to switch it. Like if you're watching the footage that I did in the raid, I actually switch my mode of my weapon quite a bit, so it does help a little bit with that. Alacrity, you gain reload speed and extra reload speed after action skill use. This is pretty much the best thing. We don't need Restless. Ascendant you're not really using. 3 into Transcendent. This actually gives more accuracy, which is good. Easier to hit things. And then increase critical hit damage after your action skill is used. So that's just increased damage, which is pretty good. Then I went into From Rest. Now, this is mainly for the charge time on recursions. Because you are charging to shoot it, this helps. Even 1 point into this is 21% charge time, which is incredibly strong. Now, for our abilities, we are using just a Phase Grasp. I do use Ties of Bind because if you accidentally Phase Grasp something, it's nice to get that split damage that links everything, and you shoot the first target, does extra damage to everything linked. So that's good, but usually you're not hitting anything with your action skill. Allure, same thing. You're not hitting anything with your action skill very much. The augment really doesn't matter. And then for your action skill element, just change to whatever you're using at the time. If you're using fire, switch to that. If you're using shock, turn off your action skill element to get shock, and then you can use corrosive. We have access to all 3. And that is it for the talent. So now we can go into our items. Now, like I was saying before, this build does heavily use recursions for mobbing. And like I said, if you go back and watch like some of my first builds when the game first came out, like the first couple weeks, I was always using this recursion. It was mainly in Slaughter Shaft back then because the raid wasn't out yet. And I was always saying this is easily one of the strongest weapons for mobbing in the game. And a lot of people weren't using it back then. This thing pretty much got super popular when the raid came out because it just got better and better the more enemies. So which is still amazing. Get a ×2, get any element. One of the best action skills for this build is on action skill end, weapon damage increased by 100%, because that'll be up pretty much most of the time. That's why it's one of the best. A lot of action skills don't actually do super well with this build. It's pretty much just this. Anything on action skill end can work pretty well, but most other things don't do too well. Recursions for mobbing, super good. For boss killing, you have lobs, super good. They did get nerfed, so they're not as good, but they're still really good boss killing weapons, still really high damage. And again, on action skill end, same anointed is always going to work pretty well. But also, you have Sandhawks, which are just incredibly strong for boss fights as well. The good thing about these is you can get every element on these, so you can just collect them all. And with Amara, you're doing so much increased elemental damage, and the Sandhawks already do ridiculous damage anyway. And also, I have these two with when action skill is active, your weapon damage increased by 200%. Now, specifically for boss fights, this is really good. And even more specifically, boss fights that don't have melee phases, this is very strong, because what you can do is you can use your action skill not hitting anything to stack up mindfulness on yourself, apply that element to yourself to get the increased damage, and then once you actually go to the boss and start fighting it, you can use your action skill on the boss. Ties the bind or your phase grasp will last a few seconds, so you can get a bit of time with the increased 200% damage. So this will allow you to get massive damage, to be able to kill bosses super quickly, and in that window that your action skill, that your phase grasp is active on the boss. So that's super good, and it makes these Sandhawks I have just absolutely destroy bosses. So for our shield and grenade mod, I'm currently using the transformer. For the grenade mod and the shield mod, again with the on action skill end, this is super important for this build. On action skill end gain elemental damage is actually very much needed for these builds, because if you didn't know, if you have one of these anointeds and you use your action skill, which applies an element to yourself, your action skill element to yourself, if you didn't have one of these anointeds on, it wouldn't automatically stack you to 25 times for your mindfulness. It would only go to 15. And what's also super good about this, if you have one of these anointeds and you have a transformer, you can still apply shock to yourself. It's just not going to deal damage to you, but it will still give you the damage increases from having shock applied to yourself, and it will still stack up mindfulness. So that's pretty good. For the shields, just get any tanky shield. The transformer, as I just went over, can be super good, so get one of those, or rechargers, old gods, any super tanky shields are going to be good. And for the grenade, you don't really use it, but get the on action skill end of elemental damage and don't stack them. So I have corrosive shock here, don't have corrosive, or one of them won't work, and just switch out your anointeds on these for whatever situation you need them in. For our class mod, we're using the spiritual driver. Whenever you activate your action skill, you apply your action skill element to yourself, and then your gun damage decrease while moving. The quicker you move, the higher the gun damage. One of the strongest class mods in the game. The rules on it aren't too important, just try to get as high mindfulness as you possibly can. That's pretty much the best. This one has decent rolls. Weapon damage, reload speed, magazine size, they're okay. The weapon damage is good. The other two, you get higher damage rolls on that. Should be better. For our artifact, we are using an elemental projector, because it's pretty much just required with spiritual driver builds. Like with spiritual driver, you use this artifact and it's up 100% of the time. It's basically a package deal. And I have a victory rush one, which is very good. You get that increased movement speed and damage, which movement speed is damage, so it's basically a double damage proc on this. My rolls are really bad. Max health, max shields, and radiate damage, really bad. A little bit more tanky, but pretty much all the secondary rolls on this one could be better, and that would be a pretty big damage increase for my specific rolls. And that is pretty much all of the build. There are some better weapons, or some good weapons. Cutsmans that are well rolled are super good. Any super strong weapon in the meta of the game right now is going to be super good. Yellow cake, stuff like that, also going to be super strong, but these are just some of the better ones that synergize well with the build. So that's the entire build. Subscribe if you want to see more Borderlands 3 content. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this build, and thanks for watching.
To the hands.
Here, I can make an entry. Viewers, comment on the screen and tell us how you want the vault thief to die. We got moderators standing by.
Fully energized. That one needed more training. Dig, dig. comes the drop. I'm ready for the fight.
Intel says there's an elevator down to the lower levels. Make your way
Valkyries. I'll get my own drink in Valhalla.
Those were advanced mechs, but we're after something bigger. Keep going.